By now, I expect that most of you will have heard the news that in the recent state elections, the AfD won Thuringia and came a close second in Saxony. But of course, that's not the end of the story, because here in Germany, we have proportional representation and more than 2 major political parties. Any government that comes to power needs to have the support of more than 50% of its assembly. And because, as is normal in Germany, no single party in either state won that many seats, 2 or more parties are going to have to try and form a coalition. This is all quite routine and normally takes a little time. The problem is that in these 2 cases, it may not even be possible, and that is because nobody wants to work with the AfD. So apart from the AfD, the populist right-wing party, the political parties that are relevant to this video are the CDU, the mainstream conservative party, the SPD, the mainstream left-wing party, the Greens, who concentrate mostly on environmental issues, Die Linke, the rather more radical left-wing party, and the new Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht, the BSW, which recently broke away from Die Linke. In Thuringia, the Greens didn't make it into the assembly at all. And of course, all of the parties have ruled out a coalition with the AfD. Out of a total of 88 seats, the AfD won 32, which is less than the 45 needed for an absolute majority. Here's the problem. With no AfD-led coalition possible, there aren't actually that many options available. A coalition of CDU, Die Linke and BSW would have 50 seats and so could theoretically work, except that the CDU has ruled out a coalition with Die Linke. So then the biggest coalition possible would be CDU, BSW and SPD. Of all the options available, this is the one with the largest number of seats, a total of 44, one short of an absolute majority. If all the parties stick to their stated positions, this is going to make forming a stable government a very difficult challenge. In Saxony, things don't look quite so catastrophic. That assembly has 120 seats, so a governing coalition needs at least 61. And that is easily achievable. The CDU and BSW could join forces together with either the Greens or the SPD to get an absolute majority. Unless some party members get their way. There is a movement within the CDU that is deeply skeptical of the BSW, and I can think of 2 reasons why that might be the case. The first is obvious. The CDU is moderate and right-wing, but the BSW comes from the radical left. On ideological differences alone, it's hard to see how these 2 parties could work together. The second is less obvious, but I think is a real concern that does need to be mentioned. The BSW is every bit as populist as the AfD. Even though it comes from the opposite end of the political spectrum, it shares similarities on many issues, including immigration, NATO, and Germany's response to the war in Ukraine. In short, there is an argument for saying that if you can't work with the AfD, the BSW is not that much better. Now, as far as I can make out, this is just a small number of CDU members expressing their misgivings. But if they get their way, then in neither state are we going to see a coalition with an absolute majority. So, what happens then? Okay, let's back up a little. I said that any government needs the support of more than 50% of its assembly. And that is true, but what actually happens is that the assembly as a whole elects a minister-president who then appoints a cabinet. The exact rules may vary a little from state to state, but what generally happens is something like this. First, the biggest party nominates a candidate for minister-president and the assembly votes. If that candidate fails to get more than 50% of the votes, then other parties are also allowed to nominate candidates and there's a second vote. If that second vote still doesn't result in a minister-president with an absolute majority, there is a third vote, but this time it's decided on a simple majority. The winner is just whoever manages to get the largest number of votes. Ideally, you do want the government parties in a formal coalition with more than 50% of the seats in the assembly. But if that's not an option, then there's always the possibility of a minority government. For example, in Thuringia, we could imagine a scenario in which the SPD, Die Linke and the BSW form a coalition with 33 seats. which is 12 short of an absolute majority. The CDU won't enter into a coalition with Die Linke, but can promise to support the government just to keep the AfD out of power. Its members vote for the SPD's candidate for minister-president, and a government is formed. But because there's no actual coalition treaty with the CDU, that party is free to withdraw its support at any time. A minority government is possible, it's just very fragile, and it might simply collapse. The nuclear option, by the way, is for the Assembly to dissolve itself and the state to hold fresh elections. That needs a two-thirds majority of the Assembly, but in Thuringia, the AfD has more than one-third of the seats, which means that that party can block early elections all by itself. Of course, things can change very quickly, but as things stand at the moment, I think it's unlikely that we're going to see the AfD in government in either state, unless the CDU breaks a taboo and starts cooperating with the AfD. But in both states, the process of building a functioning government is going to be very tricky indeed. Predicting the future is always a lottery, but I think we're going to see a lot of arguments, a lot of headlines, and whatever happens, a lot of angry voters who don't feel they got what they voted for. Meanwhile, try not to panic. Okay, I have something that I think might be able to help with that. I've been experimenting with a few new ideas recently. Take a look at this. And there you are, you see? Doesn't that make you feel better? Now, I said that any government needs the support. I said that any government needs the support. Oh, God.